Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. It is now Thursday, the 25th of July, 2024. Going to mostly talk about this little Euro signal. And again, it's pretty slight right now, but it is a signal nonetheless that something might try to develop from a tropical wave that looks like it's going to have a pretty big moisture pouch with it, but it's going to have to deal with an awful lot of dry air out there still. It's going to make its way across the Atlantic as we close out the month. And maybe somewhere in the southwest Atlantic in the early part of August, we will have to deal with this system. But for now, it's just a slight signal. Nothing to get too worked up about, but we will discuss that. We'll also take a look at what's happening in the Eastern Pacific. It's almost as if, and we'll start off with this, challenge accepted. Remember yesterday when I said that system that was 50%, if it's going to do something, it needs to do so in a hurry? Well, it did. And it's now become Bud. It's Tropical Storm Bud, and it'll be pretty short-lived, but boy, it ramped up really fast, taking advantage of the thermodynamics that are available. It's almost as if it was listening to me. I just thought that was funny, because I literally said, if it's going to do something, it needs to do it quickly, and it certainly did. But it's not going to affect any land areas, so nothing to worry about. It'll add a little bit of ace, just a tiny bit, and it'll be a few more named storm days, one or two, whatever. And the East Pac still lagging behind, for now, the Atlantic Basin. Speaking of the Atlantic Basin, of course, nothing going on over the next 7 days. We expect that with all the dry air everywhere, it seems. And in the East Pac, of course, there's Bud. Already talked about that, so we don't really have to worry about anything else in either of the two basins for now, at least from the National Hurricane Center site and their perspective. So let's look at everything from the satellite this afternoon. Let's get the red marker going. There is small Tropical Storm Bud, and it's pretty remarkable that it was able to ramp up that quickly over fairly marginal conditions, but it took advantage, and there you have it. Elsewhere in the western part of the basin here, not much going on. You can see sort of this coloration in here, haziness or whatever. That's the Saharan air layer, the western extent of it, and we still have this very stubborn pattern. Over the east, we have flood watches. In my neck of the woods, it's just been rainy and stormy. And with last week's flight, FUBAR, because of the CrowdStrike issue, and then all the weather that's been happening east of the Mississippi, flying has just not been very fun at all, has it? So hopefully this stuff will clear out in the coming days for all of you that have had kind of a nightmare, living the nightmare of trying to fly. But at least the tropics are not a problem anytime soon. When might that change? Well, let's jump over here and look at social media, Twitter to be specific, and my often reminder that, yes, I know it's called that, but I call it Twitter, so that's fine. You can call it whatever you want. Florida Tropics over at Twitter, a good account. I like just the very matter-of-fact information. Social media has lots of benefits, including the aggregation of helpful information, and of course we know there could also be an aggregation of unhelpful misinformation, and we just try to steer clear of that. Mute and block, and you'll be fine. Just put the blinders on. So we look for people that find and put the good stuff there. It's funny because it literally updated right in front of my eyes. And Florida Tropics is referring to this. We don't want anything towards Florida, right? Of course not. But the Euro ensembles are a little bit more active than the 0Z run. Overnight, it looks like the Euro almost basically dropped the idea of this system, but it's back on the 12Z run, and that whole idea here of what we call whack-a-mole, or now you see it, now you don't, whatever the metaphor you choose, that's fine. It's that kind of deal. There's not solid model consistency. We're not seeing it across the board with a huge signal in the operational, that's very important, and the ensembles. And if we go back many, many updates ago, and over the years I've said this often, it's like the operational is the conductor of the orchestra, and the ensembles would be the supporting rest of the orchestra that makes everything come together and sound fantastic, whether you're performing Beethoven's Ninth or a Hans Zimmer score, if you're into that kind of thing, movie music, you get the idea. The operational, when it's just alone out there and there's not a lot of ensemble support, is just like a conductor sitting up there doing their thing. You may have the great music, you may have the great tempo, but without the rest of the orchestra behind you, it's kind of meaningless, even if you are John Williams, the late great Beethoven, of course, or Hans Zimmer, or whoever. The Euro, and here's the metaphor, is where I'm going with this, often referred to as the King Euro, a great operational and overall model suite, but sometimes just by itself, it cannot be so great. It has to have the support of the ensembles, and if we just click on the image here, and there's a few in there, a few ensemble members that are showing something, but look at the pressures that they show. They're all pretty unimpressive. Everything is generally 1010, 1001, 1009. I'm just scanning through here. 986, there's one that would be maybe a hurricane in there. One member in all of that you see, and that's about it. So not much of a signal to speak of from the 12Z, and that's what everybody's talking about. You know, nobody's making a mountain out of this. We don't need to do that just yet. And furthermore, other people are talking about it as well. This is Mitch over in my neighboring state of South Carolina. Lots of cool stuff out there to have visualizations of the atmosphere, and this is one of those. I think this is coming from Weather Bell. You've got weather models, you've got Weather Bell, pivotal weather, tropical tidbits that we look at very often ourselves. And yeah, it looks like a big, scary looking something headed towards the southeast coast as we get into the early part of August. But remember, this is the operational model. This is just one of many different. How many is the ensembles now of the Euro? It's like, I don't even know. I've lost track. So this is by itself for the most part. And if we go back and you look at the ensembles, which was my point, going back just a little bit here, not much of a signal overall. All right. So speaking of the operational, let's just take a look at it, shall we? And let's use sort of a bluish color to highlight everything. ECMWF, operational ECMWF, 850 millibars, so about 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. And this is from 12Z this morning, meaning it was initialized around 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And let's just move it out over the next week to 10 days or so. You don't see much, but let me just draw your attention to this. Little piece of energy slips offshore of the mid-Atlantic states. I would be more focused on that, because that definitely catches my eye, rather than something coming off of Africa. See that? That develops into some kind of a surface feature. I mean, this is close to the surface, 5,000 feet, and pinwheels up there into the Gulf of Maine. Nothing too substantial, probably non-tropical in nature, but the water temperatures in this area are certainly warm enough. Maybe we get one of these short-lived, hey, where'd that come from systems, while everybody's trying to watch and see what may or may not happen out here. You don't want something over here to sneak in. And, you know, even a sort of hybrid non-tropical low can bring showers and thunderstorms and gusty winds, and you can have impacts. And that's what it's all about, right? All right, so let's keep on moving, though. Let's see, that goes into New England or whatever that is. And let's look off the coast of Africa. Anything coming off over the next couple of days or so? Yeah, a little bit. There's a couple of pouches that we can see in here, pieces of energy. There's one there, and there's another one there. Easy to identify, like I did yesterday, where we kind of dissected everything. And let's look at the relative humidity. Kind of still dry through there, that's for darn sure. The Saharan air layer, still pretty prevalent. A little bit more moisture with this farther west system, but nothing, again, to really worry about. It does amplify somewhat way on down the road there. This is in the early part of August. Gets into the northwest Bahamas. And look, just the very fact that this says August 4th means we should be paying attention. It does not mean, oh, there is a hurricane coming or there is something coming that we need to be particularly concerned about. One operational run does not a hurricane make, I guess, right? And look at, I mean, still, the early part of August, that's just brutal for hurricane development. Great news for coastal dwellers and seafaring ships that don't want to have to deal with big swells and whatnot, or the hurricanes themselves. The Saharan air layer is still very, very prevalent. The dry air really putting a cap on things. But, as I'm going to show you at the end of the update today, or at least close to the end is near for all that dry air. Climatology going to come knocking, and with it, the MJO. I shall show you. GFS, what does it show? First, pay attention to this area off of the mid-Atlantic and northeast, because again, some little deal there trying to come off, little piece of vorticity, that stalled front pinches off a piece of energy there, pinwheels it up off the coast of New England. Probably not going to amount to much, but I would not be surprised to see at least an outlook mentioned from the National Hurricane Center. I mean, you do have the Gulf Stream that runs through here. Water temperatures are very warm. They're warmer than average up through there. So we got to watch that. both the models, the operationals, are picking up on it. Probably not triggering much in the ensembles and whatnot, but we got to watch. You just never know. Again, even if it's non-tropical, I don't want people saying, it's nothing. It's nothing. Well, the weather's always something, even when it's sunny out. You can get sunburn, and that could lead to skin cancer. I mean, the weather's always something. Anyway, you get the idea. But what else is going on the GFS? Not much. Not down here. GFS really not having it like the Euro is trying to show. We run this out even to the same 10-day time frame that the Euro does, and you look in the Southwest Atlantic, we just put a big old X. There's nothing there. So I'm not too convinced that anything's going to happen, and so we don't really have to worry about it, hopefully, right? That's why we watch, because you never know. Now, in the East Pack, it's a little bit of a different story. There is the vorticity signature of Bud. This is more energy that's trying to gather in the Southeast Pacific, where the thermodynamics are better, the moisture, the reduced shear, all that kind of stuff, and the thermodynamics part. Thermodynamics, though, that's about the instability or the stability of the atmosphere, and for the tropical cyclones to go, you got to have a very favorable thermodynamic profile, and we're just not seeing that in the Atlantic. And for Bud, it's going to run into a less favorable thermodynamic profile, and away it goes into oblivion. See that? But over the coming days, what is this, about a little over a week out, possibly something pretty stout to the south of the Mexican coastline. So we'll have to watch. We'll have to wait and see, do we get an active period setting up over in the East Pack? If so, that might hinder any development chances in the Atlantic, especially if the East Pack starts to get sustained. We'll have to see about that, and that's even mentioned here as we get towards the end of today's update. In this very important post here from Ben Knoll, Atlantic hurricane season, a very favorable configuration for tropical storms and hurricanes is forecast to take shape during August. During the first and second week of next month, a convective pulse is expected to cross the Atlantic, and we're seeing that going across the Pacific now to some extent, strengthen and become slow-moving over Africa, lasting through most of August. That's very important. This should lead to greatly reduced wind shear, enhance the level of moisture. Ding, ding, ding. Let's highlight that because that's very important right there. At least we highlighted it in blue. Enhance the level of moisture across the Atlantic basin and reduce the amount of dust, and all while invigorating the African easterly wave train, factors that support tropical development. Now this I will highlight in yellow. One source of uncertainty, however, and I just talked about this with you, is the level of activity in the eastern Pacific. Should a rising cell become persistent there, it could steal some of the thunder from the Atlantic. We'll see. That'll be interesting to watch how that evolves. Oftentimes what we see is that the eastern Pacific will become busy and you get a burst of activity, and then it hands it off to the Atlantic, basically, and then the Atlantic literally says, I got it, we're good, and it takes over, especially in a year like this, where we do have the La Nina trying to come on. There is no El Nino out there. The equatorial Pacific is cooler than average right now. The Atlantic, as you well know by now, very much warmer than average. All those parameters are still there, and once the Atlantic takes off, we don't see much reason why it would not take off and stay airborne. I mean, it's going to be pretty active, it does look like, for quite a long time. And Ben sort of highlighting that here with the first part of this post, that as we get into August, the Madden-Julian oscillation should show up, and that'll herald the beginning of a very busy period. All right, so we'll see. It's all probability, right? Nothing's a guarantee until it happens. Hey, one thing I can guarantee, and I hadn't talked about it in a while, we are mostly crowdfunded, and I'm going to talk about this more as we get towards peak season, because this is how you can, A, support what we're doing, B, literally become a part of it. We're a community. It's not an app. It's not just a membership or a subscription. We all work together like a cooperative. It's an amazing thing. We've been doing this via Patreon since about 2016, so we're getting on up there now in the years of being involved with Patreon to fund and develop our work. A lot of our back end, like this amazing back-end technology that we have, including the interactive tracking map that I often reference that has the cameras on it. These are our permanent cameras, for example. The Outer Banks locations is just a quick pop-up for you. All of this is produced by people that we have met through Patreon and our whole crowdfunding. It's crowdfunding because, unfortunately, I don't have a dollar bill around for reference, but man, it takes money to do this stuff. But it also takes brain power, innovation, ideas, and I can't do everything, so we've really assembled an incredible group of people, and a lot of that is through Patreon, and you can sign up, and it's free. You can actually sign up for free. Go to patreon.com/HurricaneTrack, get the Patreon app, search HurricaneTrack. You can join for free, and then join the level that most fits your budget. You can jump around and switch back and forth if you like. I like that sort of mobility that you can do that because, I wish it was free for everybody, but then how am I going to support my family? And how are we going to do the innovative stuff that we have done for over 25 years? So check it out, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack, or get the Patreon app and look for us there. Hurricane, TRACK, right there. HurricaneTrack says it pretty much everywhere, even on my shirt. And yes, we do have a merch store. It's over at the HurricaneTrack.com homepage. You just click on the store link and you can get a t-shirt off of, I think we're still using Spring. A lot of creators on YouTube use Teespring or whatever they're called. You can get a t-shirt like what I'm wearing here. So there you go. We've covered the slight signal. Nothing to be too worried about. We're still in sort of the doldrums of July. Not much happening with all that Saharan air. As I've said also many times, very much expected. Nothing unusual about it, so forth and so on. We just need to be ready when all of that goes away, and it is showtime for all of these hurricanes that we have been talking about are likely coming. We want to make sure we're as ready as we can be. All right? And that's part of my job, is to stay on top of it. Have a good rest of your Thursday. As always, thank you for tuning in and giving me a part of your day. I appreciate it. From all of us, the awesome family of Hurricane Track, we appreciate you too. I'm Mark Sudduth. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.